Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm your host, Malathi Reanti, and today we're looking at why swimming, either as a recreational or survival skill, is important. And we look at its relevance in society. We'll also dive into the policies around it and touch upon how markets work in this sector. Basically, looking at the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. And we have someone who has worked across all these three areas. So he's been a 2000 Sydney Olympian. He's the founder of Swimming Matters and someone who's closely involved with Murtha pools. So we have Hakimuddin Habibulla on our show. So welcome, Hakim. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Malathi. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks. So what we're going to be doing is that we'll be looking at it like we usually do in all my podcasts. We'll be looking at the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar perspectives. And just to take one case in point as to why it's important to do that, even on this topic, is that Karnataka is actually the undisputed swimming powerhouse of India. Right? It's also the leading national aquatic scene for over 3 decades now. And one of the reasons why Bangalore, which is the capital of Karnataka, boasts of such being a premier hub, is that there's infrastructure. So we're looking at the markets. We're looking at a high concentration of 50-meter Olympic-sized pools, in Bangalore. Then there's the elite coaching. So here we're bringing in the markets, but also society is involved in a bit of the Sarkar. So it's home to top-tier national coaches and it has a very structured club level program. And Hakim will be going into that in more detail in the course of the podcast. And of course, we have multiple wins, the senior national aquatic championships over the last 30 odd years. Karnataka has always been on top, which also means that there's a large talent pipeline, right, for the elite level as well. So to begin, we'll first look at society and how it plays a role here. And while I was just kind of pulling up numbers, and I was quite alarmed, in fact, at one data point, and forgive me if I have to start off with this fact, but it was quite a worrying number that the National Crime Records Bureau, the NCRB, report of the accidental deaths and suicides in India, and this is though it's a 2022 report, it did record that 38,500 odd drowning deaths happen in a year. And that's 9.1% of all accidental deaths in that year. So we're basically looking at, the primary cause being 70% of the reported drowning fatalities stem from accidental slips or falls into open water bodies, such as rivers, lakes, wells, or unbarricaded ponds. More so there rather than the recreational swimming area, like in pools. And of course, the vulnerable demographic here, again, are youngsters and children, typically between 1 and 14 years. And though the data is limited here, we're looking at 2022 data, this was really something that was quite alarming. So Hakim, as someone who has kind of spent a decade arguing swimming is a life skill, not a luxury sport, why hasn't this number sort of moved the needle on how India treats swimming?
Malathi, I think that's an extremely critical question to be looking into, and it's absolutely the right place to start. In fact, my own journey in swimming started because one of my classmates drowned, and I was introduced to the water because my parents thought that if I was comfortable in the water, I would be able to save my life. The fact that I went on to compete and swim at the highest level, I only realized much later that all the swimming did not teach me anything related to water safety. Mm-hmm. Coming back to your point, it is 38,000, 39,000. These are still considered to be conservative estimates. Right. The numbers could be significantly higher. Mm-hmm. While it's about 9.1% of the Indian numbers in terms of accidents that can be prevented, India contributes to over 10% of the global drownings as well. Okay. So it's a big number, and it is an absolutely worrying number, but very few people are aware of this number. So for any action to be taken, people need to be aware, and mm-hmm. And a lot of education is required towards first creating awareness that this number, Malathi, is despite the fact that our levels of engagement with water are still very poor. So even though we have a vast coastline, we have lots of inland waters, but
Right.
our traditional ways of approaching water is don't engage, don't go, and so these numbers are already high despite our low quality of engagement.
And what's the swim literacy rate, Hakeem, right now? Like the percentage of Indians who can swim? Maybe a ballpark.
It's a question that we deal with every day. I mean, first of all, the definition of swimming, unfortunately, is not clear.
Right. Right.
So that's where the biggest gray area begins. And for someone who can scramble from, say, one side of a pool in the shallow area to the other side in the shallow area, thinks they know how to swim. But the minute they move into an open water space where the water gets deeper as you go away, they get into trouble because they can't keep their feet down.
And the
So in
currents as
terms
well.
of people who, first of all, I mean, less than 1% of India's population has access to any unstructured learn to swim to begin with. And then if you get into structured learn to swim or aquatic education, which includes water safety, I would say less than 0.00001% of even that, is at a quality that can give people the skills to deal with waters, beyond their own swimming pool.
Right. And so you've also written that swimming needs to be taught with the same rigor as a core school subject, like maths or physics and others, over maybe a longer period of time, right? You mentioned a 6 to 8 year structured progression, and not so much as a summer holiday activity, right? That many of these programs sort of teach children to. So what would it take to get water safety into the school curriculum nationally, and why hasn't it happened yet? I'm sure it sort of figures maybe in the NEP 2020, sport figures as a co-curricular, but then obviously being very specific to swimming. What is your take, Hakeem?
Yeah, so the national education policy, does talk about sport in general,
Right.
but when it comes to swimming in particular, the infrastructure becomes the first barrier. So we got to look at infrastructure very differently, to facilitate access. By that I mean, how do we look at not every school needs to have a pool. Like the national education policy, was looking at every school having a playground, for example.
Right.
But every school may not need to have a pool. But how do you ensure that every child in the schooling system gets access to an aquatic education, even in a community pool? So there could be different schools that come together. The US has the concept of a group of schools coming together and a school district, some high quality infrastructure being created in a school district. So that's a model that I believe we need to be looking at, where infrastructure, first of all, becomes accessible to a much wider audience, beyond the Tier 1 cities, so the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities as well, creating simple, safe starting points, right? Like play schools or Montessori's in the neighborhood. Just simple, small, safe spaces for children to get access, to get comfortable and learn basic survival skills. And similar to the education system, as you build skills and you want to then explore more, you then may move to a bigger school, similar to a bigger pool. And if you're really good after your 10th grade and you want to move to another city to pursue things, or to a different country, those are similar progressions even for sport, or swimming in particular, if someone wants to do it competitively. But the beginnings can be very simple and can be in your own neighborhood.
Right. No, I think that's important even for our listeners to know, because often there is the factor of infrastructure, as you mentioned, right? Having proper pools and facilities, but then it could start, like you also highlighted, at the Montessori level, because I think that's how early even children should be comfortable with water, right? And know that fear of water should be removed.
So children in most of the, we work very closely with Australia, and we've been learning a lot from there. So children there can begin learning water safety skills as young as 6 months.
Right.
So we have a teacher training program, called for infant and preschool aquatics, where teachers can work with parents and their child, from as young as 6 months. So it's purely survival, water familiarization, to begin with, because that's where their comfort begins.
Right. And children and babies actually are very natural when it comes to, in a water body, right? They're able to flap and they can stay afloat. It's just a natural
Well, more than
instinct.
that, it's a combination of two things, Malti. For very often I'm asked when's a good age for a child to start swimming. The answer is they should never stop. So they're conceived in a water-based medium,
Right.
and
Right.
you know, water birth is something that's very comfortable. And we have to look at it where somebody is, so babies have a natural anti-gag reflex, plus the lungs, which are a natural buoyancy in the body that give you the natural buoyancy in the body. Babies have a bigger torso compared to their, hands and legs, and hence
Right.
they tend to also float more easily. So that combination is what makes babies very comfortable in the water. The longer you keep them out of the water and you add that, layer it with, it's telling them
That fear.
don't go. Yeah, you add the layers of fear and you keep repeating, don't go, don't touch water, don't go near water. That reinforces the negative outlook that becomes more difficult to then break as children grow older.
Right. No, so true. Thanks for bringing that in, Hakim. And we see a lot of that now, at least in the metros, right, where we see a lot of swimming classes being held over the summer. There's a lot of advertisements around that. Public, of course, infrastructure has improved somewhat, at least in the tier one. But then I just want to bring in the gender thing here, where we have, I mean, when it comes to women coaches and teachers, they still remain a minority, right, in Indian swimming. And that sort of shapes whether girls will stay in the sport or not, even just to pick up swimming as a means of, for their own water safety. How does Swimming Matters deal with this? Are you seeing this on the ground as well? Firsthand?
Absolutely, Malti. I think this is a very big topic for us. We realize that if we want to really activate the larger ecosystem and realize not only the potential from a competitive context but also from a social context, if we want to break in various barriers, we need to have more women involved in different roles. So, to give an example of swim teachers, in Australia, gender ratio would be, say, 90% women, 10% men,
Okay. Okay. Mm.
or maybe 80-20 at max. Right? In India, it's 95% men and less than 5% women.
Mm.
So the challenge is, how do we create more awareness? For example, one of the topics we brought up and been highlighting is, mensuration, for example.
Right.
It's otherwise considered one of the barriers, one of the breaking points for most girls to continue engaging. So we have many, even those who are fortunate to get access to a pool and to a program, normally swim till they're 10 years old, and 10, 11, and then once they hit puberty, most of the girls drop off, and there are lots of myths around it. So Swimming Matters has been creating blogs, creating content to create awareness about
Yes.
whether you are a learner yourself or whether you're a parent of a learner, or you are a teacher. How do you deal with it? How do you engage? How do you create? How do you sensitize? How do we sensitize male teachers or coaches on dealing with women athletes or women fellow co-workers on these topics? It starts at very elementary levels, right? I mean, it's similar to school. I often tell that the challenges that we come across are very similar to school. So you need to keep the toilets safe. Simple things like a covered dustbin, very elementary things can make a difference in making young girls, and young women feel safe, feel more comfortable, when they enter any of these spaces. Um, so that's work in progress, and it is a very focused agenda to improve the number of women involved in the industry. The most recent teacher training program I conducted a couple of weeks ago, we had a 50-50 class ratio. And for me, that
Okay.
was a great win.
That's great. I think the effort that Swimming Matters is putting into this, and I have seen some of the educational content right on your website too, and I think it's good that it's out in the public domain as well, so others too could kind of learn from it, because often awareness and education on this matter, like you mentioned, many subjects are still taboo, right? Especially menstruation, and then when there's swimming, also there's water involved. There is a tendency to. So we know that there are a lot of menstrual products out there like tampons and other things too that could be used. I remember Nisha Millet mentioning about such things and breaking some of the myths that are there around whether women can swim during their periods or not. So this is great. Thanks, Hakim. Yeah, we'll just segue into the government part right now, the Sarkar. And I have some data with me broadly around how the policies, or rather lack of, since 1947 to now. And one thing which is very interesting that stood out was that there are two tracks that run in parallel, because swimming is such where it could be considered a sport, competitive, or it could also be like a life skill, right? It could be for safety. So that's one of the reasons why the two tracks broadly that I noticed. One was like more the Indian swimming policies that run around the competitive sport track. And the other one would be more on the water safety track. So I'll just try to touch upon both, chronologically from 1947, and then I'll bring you in, Hakim. You can give me your expert, opinion on some of these. So in 1948, a year after our independence, is when the Swimming Federation of India was formed. As we all know, the National Sports Federation has to be formed for every sport. So the SFI, it was formed via a merger of the National Swimming Association and the Indian Swimming Federation at that point in time. So broadly, it was created for as a selection pathway for the Olympics and Asian Games, and but there's no water safety or drowning mandate put in as of at that point in time. And I guess not, because we were just out of independence, and there's a lot of more important things that we had to pay attention to. So just 13 years later was when the National Institute of Sports in Patiala, the NIS in Patiala, was formed. And here was where there was where the first scientific standardized coach education system, which also covered swimming along with other 20 disciplines. That was created. And at that point in time, it was Asia's largest sports institute. Again, it was skewed towards competitive coaching. There was no mass water safety teaching being done here. Again, fast forward 2 decades. So 1984 is when SAI was created. That's when we also had the National Sports Policy, the very first one. And here we sort of had a dedicated implementing agency for infrastructure and coaching. That's where SAI came in. It's an arm of the government. And but the infrastructure concentrated obviously on just the metros at that point in time, right? There was nothing much. This is back in 1984. We had a few other things like the Rashtriya Life Saving Society. This sort of filled the government's water safety training gap. It had dedicated lifeguard and life saving certification body. Was in 1998. Nothing of significance for many years. And then the National Sports Policy came in 2001. This is the second edition of the policy after 1984. And here is where it actually formally split sports into two parts, like sports for all, which is more broad basing it, and sports for excellence. And this continues even in the recent national sports policy that was announced last year. More nuanced now, but then that's the point in time we had the broad basing and the elite. So this was the first recognition of where the private sector also came in. So markets now could actually start playing a bigger role. The government was indicating that, or the narratives at least said so. But there's no swimming specific targets, and again the drowning and the water safety was absent in this category. This was in 2001. And then we had the TOPS, which came in, the Target Olympic Podium Scheme. I'm sure, Hakim, you would have also benefited from that. So this was a more direct, individualized financial and scientific support to elite medal contenders. But again, elite level, swimming has had a minimal TOPS representation versus other traditional sports like wrestling, shooting, or more recently badminton. And one fact, which I think as a country we also need to maybe revisit, is that aquatics, basically the umbrella term we use for covering like swimming, diving, artistic swimming, water polo, any open water swimming, right? All of that. It offers the most medals at the Olympics. It offers 49. There are 49 events. Like if you take the Paris 2024, and 35 in swimming alone, versus athletics, which is the track and field, which is the closest with 48 medals, but 48 events. But that again is spread. But so Olympics. Swimming should be given a bigger pie, or focus, I would say, if we want to look at India being, on the podium, right, compared to the other sports. Now I'm just switching to the track, the water safety bit. The National Disaster Management Plan came in only in 2016, so just 10 years ago. And this is where it frames drowning, but it also frames it as a byproduct of flood and disaster. It's more of, it's not an everyday public health crisis. And there's no link to swimming education or pool safety regulations, when it was defined. And then, of course, Kalo India scheme, where it's encouraging more the tier 2 cities also to have infrastructure. But there's no specific mention of teacher, coach, workforce gap. Again, an opportunity for markets here, because then we'll have an opportunity for jobs to be created in this area. And then, of course, the recent one with Odisha was one of those in just a few months ago in 2026, which had a state-level comprehensive drowning prevention policy in India. So, I mean, I can go into more detail, but I would like to bring you in here, Kim, is that we see that over the course of the last 60, 70 years, right? It's just been here and there in fits and spurts that we've seen some mention in policies, and there's no concerted effort as such. Now, the reasons could be many, but I would like to kind of take your opinion as to why this could be happening, even though, especially if you look at swimming as a sport, why the focus has not been on, on more, it could be funds or more focus on in that area, from even the coaching perspective, knowing that we can win more medals, from the competition point of view. But water safety also being a life skill, right, for all citizens. Why isn't that also not been focused on? It's like almost like both tracks didn't get much of a say, in our policy.
So Malti, let me just add to your stats, right? I mean, you said there were 49 gold medals in Paris for aquatics. Right. Going into LA in 2028, there have been 6 new additions. So now there are 55 gold medals in aquatics in LA. Out of that, in the pool, from 35, it's now gone up to 41. So there's 41 gold medals in the pool, and then 8 in diving, 2 in water polo, 2 in artistic swimming, and 2 in open water swimming. That's the 55. And then you have, all the other sports connected with water. So you have triathlon, modern pentathlon, surfing, for which you need to be in the water. And you got sports on the water like sailing, canoeing, rowing. And when you add up all those sports, we got over 100 gold medals, in sports connected with water.
Right.
So that said, swimming for a long time, or sport for a long time, was always, looked at as results first and support follows.
Okay.
So even sports like wrestling, shooting, all of them typically had to find a way to first show results, and then the support followed. In swimming, we are still very far off world standards, and hence it's always been a question of, whether we should invest first to facilitate performance, or should we wait for a miracle before funding can come in. So finally, it's only, in the last couple of years that I've begun to see the government waking up to the fact that if India seriously wants to be a contender on the medal podium and on the medal tally, then they can no longer afford to ignore the investments and attention on swimming. So swimming has begun to get a lot more attention, and we're seeing proactive, efforts from the government and the federation towards now, finding quick wins or finding ways to allow for India to be competitive and hopefully be in contention for an Olympic gold when India hopes to host the 2036 Olympic Games. So that's one track, and like you pointed out, that's the competitive track.
Right.
Most competitive tracks, even including, they focus on how do you make the teams, whether it's the state team, the national team. That's the focus.
Right.
Coming to water safety, which needs to be is the critical foundation, that is not part of this pathway. And hence, for the longest time, even when I swam, it was only that you swam to win medals or you didn't swim at all. And again, that's a larger construct even for sport. There was nothing about swim for fun or play sport for fun. It was about you play to win or you don't play at all. So that's been a constant challenge. Slowly now, as the social environment has begun to change, now people are beginning to be open to play for fun. you know of course, with it, the construct has changed. Instead of playing on the streets and having fun and free play, now you have to go to a community sport stadium or a sport hub that has a synthetic surface or has a turf on which you play, and then there's a commercial angle to that. But in terms of free play, the grounds are reducing the number of spaces to play for,
which is a concern as well. Yeah,
which is a concern, and that's a different part you touch upon about the reducing opportunities for children and for the
equity
market.
comes into the picture. Yeah,
And for the market, the paying customer are the young adults, with good incomes and less responsibilities, so more dispensable income. So today's businesses are focused on young adults, have the time and the money to invest in their own health and well-being. Coming to water safety and drowning prevention, most of it, like you said, there's the Rashtriya Life Saving Society as an entity, but all of them brought the angle of water safety more from training of lifeguards. So lifeguard training was what constituted most part of our approach to water safety. And even that would happen ad hoc and in an unstructured manner. There were very few rules and policies to, establish standards of safety, whether you're on the sea or you're on the in inland waters or in a pool.
Or in a pool, yes.
So those things still need a lot of attention and definition. But the work we began to do was more on the aquatic water safety education front as a preventive. An example I give is if we have to deal with road accidents, which is the leading cause of preventable death, just by having policemen would not be the solution. So the traffic is required, but you need road safety education. Then you need to have every driver licensed so they know the rules of how to engage on the road. So you need to have these systems in place, and then you need the police to just ensure that it's being followed.
Right.
In water safety, it was predominantly focused only on lifeguards. So our definition of safety was have a lifeguard, then you're safe. There was no attention on the education part. So this is where the work is underway, and a lot more needs to be done. And even the government, in that matter, like you said, has only recently woken up to the education element of it. So that's where again we are seeing momentum. Even the recent engagement you mentioned in Orissa, Swimming Matters was invited to participate in it. And it was amongst the first time that everyone was happy to see someone talking about water safety education and teaching of survival skills, instead of only talking about how do we save somebody when after drowning has occurred.
Of course, yeah. I think, like as you correctly, you hit the nail on the head there when you said we should look at prevention rather than how to mitigate or put contingency plans in place, right? Especially since we know that and India has a very large coastline as well. It's not just there's a lot of opportunities for us to kind of educate our citizens in both the open water as well as in pools. And I think the opportunity is huge, and at the same time it's a life skill. Right? So. And I just hope the floodgates, pun intended, open in this in this regard. That there's more focus now on with Odisha also taking the lead. We have other states also, because sport is a state subject, right? Eventually, and they see the value in it.
It is a state subject, but just to quickly add, so the competitive pathway is managed by the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, which then supports or works alongside the various national sports federations.
Okay.
So while that is the competitive pathway and the key stakeholders, when it comes to drowning prevention, it comes under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare.
Right.
And you have then agencies like the World Health Organization that also gives guidelines for these stakeholders to follow. So that's a different, and the two usually don't speak to each other.
And I think that's where the challenge has been, possibly, right, over the decades, because of the fact that they're different ministries. And just to align all of that, sport itself, there's a difficulty because you have the education ministry to talk to, and then you have the...
And like you rightly pointed out, Malathi, in between the two of them is the education ministry. So you could literally have three of them, kind of coming together and aligning a few things, at least to build the pathways. So one is to broad base and give the right starting points, and then those who want to pursue it at a next level have the opportunity through the competitive pathways that the Federation and the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports can give them.
Oh, wonderful. So since we're talking about money, right, I just want to go into our last segment, which is the markets. And so when you look at the markets, when you're looking at the funding pipelines and how the demand and supply works, right, in the urban areas predominantly. The data I have here is that India, the swimming pool market was valued at around 204 million in 2024. And it was projected to reach around 286 million by 2033. Of course, that's a modest 3.82 in a growth. But India is also roughly in that 6% of the global swimming pool market. Right? It's a relatively small market for a country of around 1.4 billion. But then again, we know the constraints, right? I don't want to belabor that point. But so is the constraint on demand, or is it that nobody's built the supply? Because there's a lot of job opportunities also here, right? From coaching to once you have a pool, of course, from the manufacturing, everything. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities here. So if you can just bring in your views as well, considering your journey, right, from an athlete at one point being the co-founder of Go Sports Foundation, and then Swimming Matters and the teaching coaching layer, and then you have the mid pools where the building and the physical infrastructure comes in. Could you just maybe essentially see the different points of view on the same value chain that we have, talent funding, workforce, the infrastructure, and which layer is the bigger bottleneck for private capital right now?
Lovely question. Because for us, the whole pathway, we believe, even though we operate as a social enterprise, we believe that we needed to be a private limited company and a for-profit company so that we are able to build the right incentives into the system, and that eventually brings the high-quality talent in. So going back to when we started in 2013, Malathi, I mean, the first question we asked is, if we have to unlock this ecosystem, as an engineer as well, you're thinking of the problem as a hardware, software, approach. So while we always want to deal with, getting more hardware, which are swimming pools, that with existing hardware, which are with existing swimming pools, how do we improve the outcomes? And, you have to improve the quality of the software. The software in our context was that when we looked at it, we realized the key missing link was the role of a swim teacher. Swim teacher was a big missing link in the whole equation, whether it was from the water safety and drowning prevention context, or whether it was setting the right fundamentals to even for those who want to compete. So the swim teacher is where we found that sweet spot, and and that was again through our learnings from Australia. We got that in. We partnered with Australia's oldest swim teacher training organization called Oswim, and we began training swim teachers in 2013. What that did, Malathi, was that for the first time, it allowed people to start seeing the pool not as an expense or a liability that you had to cut corners around, but slowly it was how do we get them to see that pool as an asset, and revenue generation being improving the utilization of the pool, improving the retention of people, and thereby improving the economics of it. So
what would be the cost, Hakim? Sorry, for let's say a 50-meter Olympic-sized pool. What would be the cost?
Very good question, Malathi, and a very complicated question. Okay, because again, it's a very tricky one because it depends what you want it for, right? Like I tell people, if I just put two phones next to each other and I tell you, how do you estimate the cost of these two phones? Right? Often on the face of it, they both look similar. So unless you really pay attention to the purpose and performance you expect from that, and then of course, whether there's a branding element to it, are there, so depending on what you want it for,
the range.
The question that I would also ask is, for example, I often ask people is, do you even need a 50-meter pool? Right? Need a 50-meter pool? Very often, you could do a lot with smaller pools. Up to 25 meters are very good and effective, uh, especially if you want it to be covered and you want it to be all weather so that people can engage throughout the year. The minute you have to make it 50 meters, things get more expensive and complicated. And
Maintenance is.
yeah, exactly. And one of the challenges that we've had in the past, Malti, was that we built universities first. So a lot of big pools, deep water, but we didn't have the Montessori's. We didn't have the primary schools. We didn't have the secondary schools. We didn't have that pathway,
The pipeline.
the pathway and the pipeline for talent to progressively build towards making those 50-meter pools effective.
Right.
So the idea is that so coming back to your question, even on the price of a pool, I would say that the price of, let me put it in context to what we see as an ideal investment, right? Because when you think of a pool not as a community space, that every member of the community, whether you're a toddler or a grandparent, should engage for health and well-being to begin with. And that's even if you're a non-swimmer and you don't want to swim, but the benefits of water are great. So even for rehab, relaxation, fitness, for different reasons, water is good for you. Then you have people who then may want to learn to swim, and you create spaces relevant for learn to swim or aquatic education to happen. And then you have those who want to swim for life. You create the space for those who want to swim for life, and the minority of that could be the competitive athletes. So when you look at it from that much larger perspective, then more mature countries like Australia, for example, would spend upwards of 20 million Australian dollars on these community facilities. The investment in India today is extremely poor. It's still very the big investments are only for pools that are built for big competitions. If the venue is not meant for high performance, then we see a lot of shortcuts being taken, compromise of quality. We don't have standards for water quality. We don't have standards for safety, hygiene. So all of these things, and the lack of that just compromises the the way things are even valued or priced.
So basically, in resorts, hotels, apartment complexes, this is where those shortcuts would be applied, I suppose.
Yeah. So they all are part of the landscape. They all are part of just for activities to be done around them, but usually not in them. So that's where the bigger challenge has been. And I'm hoping that that begins to change. So we have a lot more high quality community spaces that respects hygiene, safety, makes people comfortable, brings in across gender, age, brings them all in, and then you create the pipelines and the pathways, for those who may want to learn and then continue to swim for life. So when you look at that, and so just going back to my story of where we began,
yes.
we realized that when people were even talking about building infrastructure, many people were wanting to cut corners because they did not see what value they could gain from it. The minute we started building the capacity of swim teachers that became economic generators, and they started creating value, then people said, wait a minute, I mean, okay, now if I have to run a business, now I have to start paying attention on the quality of my equipment, quality of design, quality of engineering of the pool, the amenities I'm giving around it. So over a period of time, we've seen Bangalore, especially Bangalore, transform. And when you talk about the market coming in today, we've got a lot of venture capital funding coming to entities like Cult, Game Theory, Machaxi, all of them getting funded, and the aquatic part of it contributes to a large part of the revenues, if not the largest part of the revenues. So all those seeds at some point were sown by some of our work in making people aware that there is value to be created.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
But the big gap that we still see is as the market came in, the market, of course, chooses the path of least resistance.
Least resistance, yes.
It picks low-hanging fruits where the money is easily available, and that is with young adults with disposable income. So today we see a lot of programs focused on young adults who are first-time learners, but at the expense of children. So children have minority timeshare in many of these spaces, or no timeshare, in some of
Yeah,
these
no, good
spaces.
point. Yes.
And that's where a critical attention is also required.
Okay. No, wonderful, Hakim. I mean, there's so many. In fact, there's a lot of other questions I wanted to go over, but unfortunately, the paucity of time, I need to sort of stop. Yeah. But thank you so much. Is there any one thing that you would like to just, before we close, highlight?
I would say that, I would love to see how, swimming is integrated into the national education policy. Aquatic education, which is more focused on water safety and drowning prevention or survival skills. Let me put it that way. Because again, drowning seems to, as the word seems to be more scary. So more water safety and survival skills oriented, which needs to be a basic fundamental requirement. And I would love to see more, with better quality of participation and engagement with the water. I definitely see, some of them taking the competitive pathway and realizing the potential we believe it also exists towards getting an Olympic gold medal by 2036.
Right. Yes, yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. But I think it's in a good juncture now, especially since the sports ecosystem itself has turned that corner, and there's a lot of focus on it. We hope that brings about.
But while I give this context of even the funding and all of that coming in, all of that is still in the recreational space, Malathi. In the high performance space, we've been seeing entities like JSW, that's getting involved. They're doing a big program in Odisha. They're looking at other spaces where they can build. We've got Glenmark coming in through their foundation. Right. So there are entities that have started. Now we need to, we believe the platform is ready for more funding to come in also for the competitive pathway and build that, alongside all of this. And the government recently has also given a pretty large budget.
Yes, for the Halo India scheme.
And so some of these pathways can really start making a difference. And keeping fingers crossed. So funding's coming in from different directions. And so swimming or aquatic engagement seems to be in a good space.
Good, wonderful. Yes, no, I absolutely agree. Thanks once again. You helped not just bring the athletes' perspective, but also the entrepreneurs and the infrastructure builders' view, right, all into one conversation. So thank you so much, Hakim.
Thank you, Malathi. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And to all our listeners, before we close, applications are open for the 4-week Open Takshashila course called Building a Sporting Nation. This looks at the intersection of India's sports ecosystem with the Samaj Sarkar and Bazaar. The early bird closes on the 15th of August and classes start on the 5th of September. Those interested can check the link on tinyurl.com, Building a Sporting Nation 2026. Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.